Hey, happy Tuesday. It is time for the LITE Firestarters Happy Hour podcast. I had every intention of getting off the road and just podcasting from wherever seemed to work, but that's not happening. I've decided I'm just going to keep it rolling. Pardon me, just because I'm still not at 100%. And it helped me decide on the topic for today, too. Honestly, I want to talk about transitions and how important they are to our lives, the different ways we all approach them, and honestly, hopefully get some feedback from you all on different things you do as well. But it's good to be back. It's great to be back podcasting, actually, because the whole inspiration behind this is just that there has been a lot going on, a lot of fun things, a lot of exciting things, but that also means a lot of change and transition. And if there is one thing the past 2.5, 3 years have taught us, it's that the transitions are going to keep coming. So that's why I think it's really important to talk about how we handle transitions, what they mean to us, how they can be actually a force for good. A lot of companies have been responding and reevaluating, what their business model looks like. They've been assessing the impact of different changes, different factors. The big I word, inflation, comes up in conversation and in the news. And I'm not even a big news person, so it's not something that can be avoided or ignored. It's something that's ever present on our minds. And what does that mean for us? It means that we're going to have to make adjustments. So when I talk about transitions, it's not just in the corporate world, but it also impacts your family life, your home life. If you are someone that was impacted in the sense that we've already done a whole podcast about the, what do they call it? The quiet resignation. Now there's like quiet firings going on. But we did a whole podcast talking about that. But also maybe, you're still in your job, but they did a restructure and your whole role was redefined. That's been happening as well. And luckily, I do think there are some ways that we're moving back towards what we knew is normal. So that's even been a transition, because for people who weren't in office as much. I remember when everyone was hearing the talks of, okay, the return to office is coming, or it was like a hybrid model. I know several of my friends that were like kind of dreading it and not looking forward to it, but I know that they've since adjusted. So I bring all those different things up to say the transitions are not ending anytime soon. They're just kind of a fact of life at this point. And we can even keep it as basic as the seasons right now. If you're in the Midwest, if you're in Chicago like I am, then you know that we're in a seasonal change right now. And that's part of why I caught this stupid flu that I got from my daughter. The weather changes do not help us in any way, shape, or form. But that's also what's going to highlight what's happened with the pandemic too, because this is our season to see if the numbers are going down or continuing to trend down, or what the next variant is. Because I did see something about how people aren't taking coronavirus actually seriously enough, and we still have the possibility of being impacted. So it's all showing us that, yes, we are resilient, but you've also got to come up with a system, more or less, to cope with the transitions? Or, okay, let's break it down. There could be one or two ways, I think 2 ways that you can handle the transitions. You either create systems, which for someone like me who prefers to live off of a schedule, who really has to live off of a schedule just due to the nature of my family life and having kids on parenting schedules and in school and in activities, like it's a necessity. And to deal with different life transitions, whether it's a new work schedule or a new work team, it impacts the systems that you have in place because you're kind of tweaking it to fit new obstacles, new challenges that have been brought to your attention, right? And then the other thing is, you could choose to kind of just go roll with the punches, go with the flow, and make modifications as you see fit. I am not familiar with that model. I'm not familiar with how to really excel at that. Trust me, I felt like that was me totally last week, though, when I knew that my week was not only going to be in a new environment, but I was fighting through what was one of the worst sicknesses I've ever had. I never caught COVID-19, but getting the flu and the chills and the just fighting fatigue and trying to stay hopped up on medicine while also in a new place, learning everything new was a challenge in and of itself. And all I could tell myself was to just go moment by moment and get through, do the little things I could do, like take medicine, use as much caffeine as possible to keep going, and just go moment by moment. That's the closest I've really ever gotten to this whole go with the flow idea. But it works for some people, and it's supposedly like a more stress-free life if you go that way. If you've ever read the book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, or I forget the second book he wrote, but there's 2 of them. I want to say it's A New Awakening. I could be wrong. I have both of the books at home. But in both of those books, they really say that essentially we as humans create our own strife. We create our own struggle because we're operating off of emotions. Emotions are one of the biggest things you have to learn how to master. And 2, that there's really nothing in life that's designed to harm us in any way. We create our own stress with the way we perceive things to be. But at the end of the day, if you're fully present in a moment, you can't change where you're at and what you're doing. How are you going to get elsewhere? This is not the day and age where we've got the beam me up Scotty capabilities yet, right? So if you just relax and own that you're exactly where you're meant to be, where the universe is designed to, sorry, I've been using headsets all day today, so my ears hurt. So I hope you guys can hear me. But to get back to the point, we are in a place where we're exactly where we're supposed to be if we just accept that we don't have a ton of control over our environment. We have total control over how we respond to things, how we perceive them to be. And if we understand that there's nothing that's really against us, it's even the things that we look at as challenges or that are bad are designed to teach us and to help us grow and improve as people. For instance, have you ever had a moment in life where you got kind of shocked or scared? Let's take a car accident. If you've ever been in a car accident, and in that moment, it's just like, oh my God, what just happened? Why is my car wrecked? And why do I have to call the insurance company, and you need to find out if everyone's okay, and were there other people involved? So you can look at it that way. Or if you focus instead on, thank God I'm okay, that the car, this is what ends up happening, especially if you call someone, if you're panicked after you've been in a car accident, call someone and they're like, all right, is everyone okay? The car is just a material thing. You can get it fixed. At the end of the day, it did what it was supposed to do and protected you. So it's all in how you perceive things to be, right? Or let's see if I can come up with like a better example, or another example. Just maybe something as simple as missing your flight. Um, you know, there are instances where I know I've been traveling and I've been rushing and I don't know how, but I look up and I'm like, oh my God, I'm cutting it close on getting to my gate or whatever. And it turns out that by you missing your flight, you ended up getting an upgrade, or that's never happened to me. I wish it had. But I definitely have heard of people who, because they missed their flight, they ended up missing a bad storm. And everything ended up working out. In the end, they still got where they needed to be. But it's all in your mentality towards things, right? So there's that approach. But my preferred approach is honestly to have a plan. I have type A tendencies. I still own that. And most people I know, like if you have a plan in place, if you have some semblance of, this is what we are going to do, when something unexpected happens, you adjust that plan, right? And when it comes to these transitions, the hard part is you can only plan for so much, right? There's some things you do know and some things you don't know. So you assess, let's get more specific. Like, let's say that you are starting a new class, like you've decided to further education, go the continuing education route or go the graduate route. And the fact of the matter is, it's a huge investment where, you're investing not just money because you're going to be paying for these classes, but also your time. And you have to fit it into the life that you already have, the schedule that you already have. But in order to succeed in that instance, I don't think it's going to be one of those things where you just kind of go with the flow and take step A and just say, oh, okay, I've signed up for my classes and I'll see how much homework I get. No, you're going to block out a certain amount of time to ensure that you can handle the coursework, to make sure that you're going to get the grades you want, so that it's a worthwhile investment, right? You're going to plan ahead. You're going to create a schedule. And the fact of the matter is, you're probably going to need to make even more adjustments, because again, there's the element that you do know, but then there's also going to be factors that you couldn't account for, that, let's just say, there's more networking elements to your classes because you're doing grad work and you need to do more group projects and you've got to factor in other people's schedules. That can happen as well. So those are the main two approaches I think of when it comes to transitions. And then the other thing that I strongly encourage, and that has become a theme more or less, is that you're going to have to accept the idea that you're going to possibly need help on occasion. When we are going through transitions that aren't entirely in our control, there's this element of trust and surprise where you have to factor in that you can't do it all by yourself. You can do as much as you possibly can, but there are going to be occasions where the logical thing to do may be hard in some senses depending on your relationships, but picking up the phone and just asking someone hey, can you step in? Can you help me? I really want to succeed at this. And I find that if you allow people in and share with them, what the purpose is behind what you're doing, what's the true driving force behind things for you, they're more likely to buy in and want to help you succeed and want to ensure that the transition doesn't kind of lay you out, like put you out for the count. Um, and that's one of the really cool things about what the pandemic has shown us, is that people really do want to help. They do really want to be there for their friends, for their family. And it's one of those things that's kind of created a lot of reassurance, and allowed people to build, build in ways that they didn't anticipate. So just in touching on the transitions, the different approaches you can have towards it. And I wanted to also share, other examples of people I know that had success in their transitions now. The examples I had in mind were definitely, they're based on people I've known for a really long time. But it's the only way I can come up with that I can also share, like, the not end result, because we're all still living, right? I'm still doing different things. But I do have several friends where, they were in a job that initially, they loved. It was in a field that they really wanted to do, but it ultimately wasn't fulfilling them due to different systemic problems, like basically the organizational structure just wouldn't allow them to grow, wouldn't allow them to flourish, wouldn't support the idea that there's more than one way to skin a cat, that there's more than one way to get a job done. So in this instance, my friends basically created their transition, and they were able to take a little bit more ownership because they started their own business, right? And I'll never forget one of my very first mentors from when I first graduated. But actually, even before that, I did an internship as well. But they said, they had got the website, they had bought the space, they had the infrastructure, they had, their phone lines open and ready. But when it came to getting really started and having success, they had to pick up the phone and make calls to former clients, to friends, to let them know, hey, we're in business, we want to work hard, and this is why our business model is different. And they had to share. So at the end of the day, it was that network, that team, that more like, I shouldn't say team, more of a camaraderie in wanting to see others succeed, that allowed them to flourish in their transition. And in that first company that I'm thinking of, that I'm talking about, they ended up building out their team, and then the way their model worked, it was also like making sure that they had seasoned professionals that were joining their team to help their business expand and grow. But I also easily can think of another friend where, they were in the education space as far as their field, and they decided to switch into a totally different industry, but it was an industry that a family member of theirs had been successful in. But again, when they came to building their business and switching into that industry, it really required them to lean on their friends, reach into their network, and say, hey, this is something I'm doing that I know is going to make an impact, and I want to grow. Can you help me? So it's important in those transitions to lean on those that you trust, that love and care about you. So yeah, as far as those transitions, I definitely feel like it's important to get that reminder that you can take more than one approach. Everyone doesn't have to do the same thing. You can either go with the flow or come up with a plan, but leave flexibility in that plan to account for things that you just don't know are going to happen. And then also make sure you ask for help if you need it. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. I know for me, that was a really, really tough adjustment. I am not the type of person that enjoys asking for help. I love to be independent. But man, just in the past few years and the different things that I've faced as an individual, I've faced on behalf of my family, definitely have to get over that mentality that it's a limiting belief. If I lean into any terminology that I know from all the different trainings and different things that I've done, limiting beliefs are one of those that will really trip you up. That there's other possibilities, there's other ways to get things done. And even in preparing for the podcast today, because I was really struggling a little bit and like, all right, I've been doing this podcast since late April. I've been very consistent, honestly, in making sure that on Tuesdays there's going to be something broadcast. I've only had to use a pre-recording once. In other instances, I've like recorded it, but it was still within the same week. But I've only done one. And even in preparing today, I was looking at different articles, and one of them was about a woman who took advantage of the fact that her career, she had already built up her client base, and with the pandemic making remote work more feasible, she decided to move to a whole nother country in the Middle East, no less, and ended up purchasing and living there for a year. Now, she chose to move to Turkey, and I guess that country had a program that allowed her to get, I think it was a visa for a year. So there were certain things about her transition that made it a little easier, but she's not, like, that article is for someone who, I don't know, it's just a stranger, it's just a story that was shared, but I actually know someone who was Chicago-based, who started her digital online presence and decided to move to Mexico during this pandemic time, and was able to do that because of how she was building her business digitally. So there's just a lot of people doing a lot of really cool things, but what's allowing them to do that and giving them the freedom to do that is the fact that they are I'm sorry. Oh, thank you for the feedback. I love it. Uh-oh. All right. So, sorry, I got distracted looking at commentary. But the whole reason why they were able to do that is because they looked at things differently, were open to the idea that, this is like a special opportunity we have right now where we can go out, try different things, and we have that flexibility. And it's really up to us to make sure that we continue to push to keep that, because you're already seeing the signs of it, right? You're already seeing the signs of companies wanting us to get back into the office, or of people trying to say like, oh, it's great for me to try this out, but are they going to be able to sustain it? And ultimately, it's a choice whether or not you're going to sustain that, and you end up figuring out the details of how to do it. And like I said, like I started out with this, as far as transitions, you can either go with the flow, which works for some people. You can have a flexible plan, but I think the key is always going to be, are you willing to use your resources that are available to you? So, normally I would open it up to more questions at this point, but because I didn't open everything up the way I normally do because of this commute, it's not as easy for me to see what other feedback will be there. I was hoping that text might actually give me some insight. So I have this feeling I'm going to end up making this a shorter podcast today. But, I know what I'm failing to do today. This is how you know it's been a little while since I've done a podcast. There's always supposed to be the commercial break. So don't forget, you're supposed to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. If you're watching the replay, I have to say thank you because your input and like your feedback that I get from the replays really matters too. And I just want to make sure that you do get the shout out while I'm recording this still. Definitely check out the website. I've talked about it for the past few weeks. Next month is going to be several events that I've had the discussions for. It's just a matter of getting the details up and the links created. But we will be having events again starting next month. So I'm really excited about that. I really hope you check out the website for that. And this podcast, I did not come up with a featured charity. I always like to make sure that we have a charity that we're featuring. But the fact of the matter is, I knew for this month, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I really did want people to support. For me, and this will be the second time this month I've talked about it, but St. Margaret's Village, it's a domestic violence shelter in the Englewood area of Chicago, where that particular, Maria's Village is the one that I visit the most, but there is another shelter for men, but Maria's Village is the one that supports the women and children, so I want you guys to go and check out that website, so let me not forget to bring that up. But it totally ties into the initial topic of transition. So it's a little bit different spin on it. So I'm going to switch gears and also touch on transitions more when you're doing it, not just because of responding what's going on around you, but like sometimes it's important for your health. You just need to make some changes so that you're in a better headspace. It's those transitions, I feel like, hit you unexpectedly, and you just hit this tipping point where it becomes this necessity. And in that instance, I still think it applies where you have two choices. You can either go with the flow or you can plan ahead. But when you're doing it out of necessity, I think that whichever one of those two paths you go on, it's gonna evolve on its own because of that need that's there. Hopefully that makes sense. Sometimes, these ideas that come, they're not always, unless you're in it, it's not gonna resonate as well. So if you're not quite in that space, I still appreciate the support. But if you're going through it, you're going to understand, like, it's not even about doing what's best for everybody else. You've just got to do what's best for you. So that one, I wasn't really totally planning on going the health and wellness route, but because I talked about just that shelter, and it just reminded me, sometimes people are going through a transition that they weren't excited about it. And when I think of transitions, a lot of times there's excitement more around it because you're preparing for something. It's usually something that interests you, or it's something that you're doing to better yourself. And I guess because I was inspired by the whole idea of being forced into a different situation, you are still trying to better yourself, But I feel like the unprepared element of that transition is what makes that harder. But ultimately, you've got the foundation that you need there. So yeah. I've covered the main things that I wanted to cover today. If there's anything that comes up in the comments section, I'll be sure to respond to those. I don't want to drag the podcast out today just because, for the sake of hitting an hour. We're at the 30-minute marker. I know that for a lot of people I know right now, especially this time of year, with it being, for a lot of people, it's like holiday season. So you're also mentally preparing for this transition of seeing people, whether it's in your family or maybe it's even friends you haven't seen in a while. But it's that time of year where that happens, where you have like Friendsgivings or you have different occasions that come up. And that element of transition can be difficult. But at the end of the day, if you also make sure to kind of give yourself breathing space, just that knowledge that everything doesn't have to be perfect. A transition inherently means that you are going through changes that you don't have full control over. And if you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of breathing space to deal with the fact that, this is that time of year where you may encounter people that make you uncomfortable. You don't have to stay around them. Don't forget that part. You don't have to, pardon me, you don't have to stay in uncomfortable spaces, but challenge yourself to, give yourself a few minutes, try it out. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I know this time of year, this quarter always breezes by. And I find that sometimes what helps is to think about the goal. Like, some people make New Year's resolutions. I'm not really one of those, but I do like to think about, what are things that I want to see happen. It doesn't have to be in a set time frame, but it does need to be something I want to work towards. And just having that vision, let's put it that way, having that vision makes it so that you can proceed through those transitions a little bit easier. Hey, what's up, Tai Tai? Thanks for joining. I don't know if you just jumped in, but I was actually wrapping up. So I talked about transitions, 2 different approaches to them, and then overall always making sure that you are making use of your resources or reaching out for help. I'm going to do one final commercial break where I remind y'all to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and just lean in and enjoy. We're at a time of year where I think it's easy to get overwhelmed. And if you give yourself breathing space, if you understand that transitions are a necessary part of life that are going to bring you some good, whether it feels like it in the moment or not, you're going to get to the other side. So with that, I'm going to leave us on that note. But thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for bearing with me as I get back into the podcast flow. And I promise next week I'll do better and I'll make sure I go the full hour. So have a great night, y'all.